All right. Welcome to the 12th episode of Bethany's Refuge Ministries. If you can, please excuse the sound of cars going in the background. For this episode, we actually just have a conversation with one person that some of you guys may know, Andre Pulgar. We're going to be doing an interview with him, and then we actually have our lesson time with him. He's someone who's studying how to teach at APU right now, and so thought we'd invite him in to kind of like give a lesson and kind of test things out. Besides that, we don't have anything else going on for the episode, but he does pose a question that we will be asking in the Zoom call after, and he might even join us for that, but no promises. But we'd love to see you in the Zoom call after. A link will be in the description. And lastly, we have an announcement, which is another online event that we want to do with you guys, and that is the launch of a new Minecraft realm for the Vision Youth Ministry. Peyton's been working really hard on getting kind of like a spawn point set up and everything looking just a little bit nice to start off for us. But since Minecraft came out with a new update, we thought it'd be fun to kind of kick it off with all of you guys and test some things out and work in a new world. We know that you guys really enjoyed the last one, so we hope that this is another thing that can be more interactive with you guys. The other thing that we want to do with this is kind of like a weekly event type thing, so because there's different milestones that we can do in the game when it comes to fighting the Ender Dragon together, or even fighting some withers and get some beacons, or even just setting up a day to explore the Nether all together. Anyways, we'll be doing that kickoff at 7 o'clock on Friday, and basically the whole weekend, whatever you guys want to do, hop on. I'll try and be on there as long as I can, Friday night till Sunday morning, and hopefully I'll see a lot of you guys on there. But in order to get onto the realm, we are going to be posting the link to it in the Discord that we have. So the link to our Discord is actually going to be in the description here, but we'll have something up on our Instagram on Friday when the time comes. So hopefully we see you guys there, and yeah, hope you guys enjoy the video. Yeah. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem.
Me and Ray wanted to go through a small interview segment that we do on our YouTube channel. So if you don't know, we have a YouTube channel for our youth. We try to get something out every week. We haven't been doing it every week, but we thought it'd be cool to have you, since you have a bit more relationship with the Bethany Youth Ministry, being that you didn't get out of it too long ago. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and what your relationship to Bethany Church has been?
So yeah, my name is Andre, and I'm going to Azusa Pacific University. I am majoring in youth and family ministry, mainly about serving, kind of being like Jesus, not going places to look to be served, but to look for opportunities to be served, whether that's inside the church or outside the church. And my relationship to Bethany Church, I used to go there starting at 5th grade all the way to 8th grade. I slowly started to join like 6th grade. I was part of the youth group. I would come, once in a while here and there. And then as time went by, I joined soccer. So I was distant. I wasn't always coming, I'd be like a new face every so often. I would see a couple familiar faces from school, but I was on and off. And then high school came around. Sometimes I was able to, sometimes I wasn't able to. Once I tore my ACL, playing soccer, that's when I had a lot of time. And that's when I really got involved. And I started coming like every week. And I would bring a couple friends and my brother and started to be a familiar face and not a new face. And a year ago I graduated, but it felt recent.
Alternatively known as Chad or Brad, which would you... Are you Chad?
I think I'm Brad.
You're Brad.
Sean.
So
is
Chad. you say Chad and he goes Brad.
Yeah, I'm like, what's up,
okay.
Chad?
Oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
I forgot about that.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
Our first question: What is your like kind of day-to-day work, school, anything looked like before having to socially distant, and what does that look like now for you?
Yeah, during school it was in the middle of my second semester, so it was a little weird just to kind of hear that that school might go online, and I was thinking, I'm like, that's never gonna happen. That's happening in Texas. That's happening on the East Coast. That's never gonna happen, over here. Because at the time it was like, I knew some people said that they knew people in Texas that had it, but it was mostly just on the other side of the country. It didn't feel even close at all. And then all my professors were saying, you know, be prepared for next week to go online. Like, it's not official, but we might. And I was like, nothing ever crazy happens over here in California, or at least in Southern California. And I was like, we're chilling. And the next thing I know, the Friday, because that was on a Wednesday, and then that Friday, they were like, okay, everyone, we're moving online, you know, stay home, don't come to class. And I was like, what the heck? I was like, are you serious? But yeah, so like everything just changed. Like, you lose a lot of motivation. It's I think, and even just, not even just for college, for high school, it's super easy to lose the motivation just because you force yourself to go to class. You force yourself to come home. I mean, you force yourself to do homework because you're just in a different environment. It just changed to always being home. Like, now it depends when I want to get up. I mean, before it felt more restrictive just because it's like I had to go to class, where this time it's like I only had like a couple classes meeting up, you know, once or twice a week. And that was only like 2 classes. So like, other than that, I was like free. I had the choice to really do my homework whenever. I mean, I felt lazier and I was pretty bummed on myself just because I like to be productive. I like to do things every day. I don't like to waste time. And so I quickly try to adapt to that. And so during school, I try to find ways to do homework in other environments. So instead of just staying at the table, you know, at the table in my house all the time, I actually sat out where I'm at right now. I would sit here sometimes to just do homework, or like lots of times I would listen to classical music. But then after that, I would sit outside. And I would even face the sky. I'd be facing that way. And I would just like love to hear nature. And it was like a pretty crazy experience just because it's like without the music, like I was just minding my own business and nature was just taking care of itself. And it was just like if it wasn't for humans, like this world would be perfect, you know, like this place like doesn't need us. We sometimes think that we're helping the world. And it was just amazing just to see how like the birds would just kept chirping. Nothing stopped the birds from chirping. Nothing stopped the birds from flying. The squirrels kept doing whatever they do, just running around. To see that every day, it just made me be in awe just because all of this was just happening in my little area, you know, like my little house. Like I was just kind of like amazed. I'm like, imagine if like places like forests, like imagine how awing like those places are. Or I think that was one of the things that pretty different, actually pretty cool. And I was not anticipating that. I was just like, you know, I asked Alexa, I'm like, Alexa, you know, play nature music. I'm like, or nature sounds. And I'm like, you know what? Like, why am I saying that to Alexa when I'm inside? I could just go outside. So yeah, so that's how it changed. Yeah.
Spitting truth, dog. If it wasn't for humans, this world would be perfect. True that.
I wasn't trying to preach or anything, but yeah.
That sounds like what your day-to-day is kind of look like is mainly schoolwork.
The option for hanging out with friends isn't really there. And social distancing is really weird and really crazy because sometimes I remember going to the store for my mom and I was in line and I had to move closer to the person behind me and it was just like a magnet. I took a step back and they took a step back and I was like confused. I was like is this person not like me? Is this person like a little weird in the head? I was like, social distancing. I'm like, bro, like I'm over here like because I was like all confused, but it's really given me an opportunity to also focus on God. I know before I'd always focus on school. I'm always like focusing on soccer, but this time around, like I'm able to do my own type of studies. I'm able to focus on God more and to make a commitment to myself to try to do something with God every day. So I think, you know, there's less soccer, there's less of me, there's more of God. So it's definitely cool, and I'm still definitely playing like soccer all the time. I'm trying to be as productive as possible. I'm not trying to gain weight or anything, you know. So I'm trying to stay in weight and stay in good shape. So I know that's a difficult thing, not easy to do.
All right.
Big Andre, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. We miss you, bud. It's so good to see you, to hear how you've been growing, maturing, and learning to seek out opportunities to serve is just so encouraging to us as leaders of the group you were just formerly in. And speaking of that group, the last thing we'd ask is if you had any specific encouragement for the youth who would be watching now, what would you say to them if you had a chance?
I would say don't feel pressured to do anything. I know like now it's really easy. I know I work out. I try to work out as much as possible. I try to do as much exercise, I play soccer. I mean, as an athlete, for me, I'm always trying to get better. I'm always trying to get stronger. And I know, at least for other people, it can be difficult to start. You feel like, I mean, even not as an athlete, maybe it's whether, you're trying to read a book, you're trying to exercise yourself. You're not trying to do anything crazy. You're not trying to get really competitive in anything. Whatever it is, if you have summer school, I think it's really easy to put pressure on yourself. It's like, I have to do these things. It's like, I need to start because like I need to lose weight, or I need to do the homework, all these things. And it's so easy to think about not starting and trying to avoid it. I was talking to my little brother, and it's like, this is an opportunity for a lot of people to do a lot of things, but it's so easy to think about it. But it's always difficult just to start, no matter how many times, how long you do whatever you're trying to do every day, as long as you do it for 5 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, as long as you try to stay consistent and just start doing it, I think you'll succeed in whatever you're trying to do. Yeah, so I would say just try starting and trying to trust God with that. Just even if that's your relationship with God, if you're thinking, like, this is a perfect opportunity for me to start reading the Bible, this is a perfect opportunity to pray, every morning or every night, starting to do something with God. Because I mean, that's something that easily happened to me. I was like, dude, I have to do this, as a Christian, like, I believe in God, and like I have to set time for God, and I have more time. So obviously, if I have more time, like, I'm gonna feel guilty if I don't spend it with God. And it's so easy to think that.
Right? Or that's the hope, right? That's the hope. How many times that hope becomes reality is a different story. But
it's mainly just starting. So I would encourage you guys just to take a step. You don't have to pray for 5 minutes. You don't have to pray for 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes a day. You don't have to read for 10 minutes. You don't have to read a whole chapter. If one day, if you just start reading one verse, next day 2 verses, 3 verses, 4 verses, and add on whatever you do, as long as you're growing a little bit, and whether that's God, your relationships, that's working out, your health, all those things, as long as you just start it, you'll be fine. And just trust God and listen to God, and go outside and sit outside and listen to nature, so I would encourage that, and you guys got this. Yeah.
Well, Andre, it is, again, a pleasure to have you. We love you, bro, and we are excited to see where God's taking you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
And now we're moving on to our lesson segment of our video. That's something that we wanted to invite you into. This past Sunday, yesterday, for us as of recording, Andre actually spoke for his church. Maybe, and I was hoping that maybe we could talk a little bit about that. Being that your major is focused towards the youth, maybe you can get some practice in talking to our youth.
So at APU, we had to give 2 lessons, but we had to create 4, and it was a series. And by the end of the semester, we had to have 4 lessons and a name of the series, and just like any other person, like you, Billy, and you, Ray, or Brandon, or Mr. Penn, maybe they might know him as, but Brandon, like the normal stuff. You guys would come up with series or some lesson plans, and you guys would have a point. It's just like that. And so it's just for college students. I made this series called "Gaining Traction in Your Interaction." And it's a little catchy. I like it. I like the rhyming. I like how smooth it is. And really what it mainly focuses about is, pretty straight up. I mean, trying to gain traction in your interactions. I mean, it's trying to interact with God. I think there was a time, not even just in college, but, even before that, it's always difficult to find interaction with God. We think sometimes God isn't close. Sometimes we think that God is far away. And so I really wanted to do this series on interactions, whether that's a good interaction or bad interaction, on any type of interaction. And so on this first lesson, I talked about Israel in the beginning of Exodus. I do like a speed run, just Israel's in Egypt. They're growing in numbers. Pharaoh's scared. He tries to decrease their numbers by doing multiple things. And the very last thing, he tells everyone to throw their baby Hebrew boys, into the Nile River. The interesting part with that is that when he tried destroying the very people that he tried destroying, he actually created a leader. This leader that we know is Moses. And so then Moses grew up in Pharaoh's household, and he was raised as any other kid that Pharaoh would have had, or the Pharaoh's daughter would have had, because he was put in the basket, went down the Nile River, and Pharaoh's daughter found him, took him in, called him Moses. And so he was raised, and he knew all the Egyptian gods, because back during that time, Egyptians believed in many gods. I mean, there's like the sun god, I'm pretty sure there's like a moon god. Like, you can say anything. You could probably say like grass, and they probably say like there's some type of god for grass. So Moses was not dumb at all. He knew a lot of things. He knew a lot about their writings, and he knew how to write well. And so he was just a well-rounded man. And so one day when he was like grown up, he saw a Hebrew slave actually be beaten. He came up with this idea, which is not something I would recommend for every person to do or anyone to do. And he decides, instead of the Egyptian striking, the Israelite to death, the Israelite man to death, the Hebrew man, he decided to strike the Egyptian man himself, and which resulted in that man's death. And Pharaoh did not take this well. And so I talked about just how Moses was just chased into the desert, and then he ended up in the desert, ran away from Pharaoh, found someone to marry, was married for 40 years. It had been 40 years and he was married. He was just watching a flock of sheep, and then suddenly there was a burning bush. He goes to this burning bush because he has nothing else better to do, because, watching sheep eat is pretty boring, I would assume. After doing that for 40 years, of course, maybe the first day pretty cool, but after 40 years, I don't know. I think it might be the same. He encountered God in this burning bush because God was in this bush. He got closer. God told him to take off his sandals. And in the sermon that I gave yesterday, on Sunday, I read out of Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 to 12. And if whoever's watching, if you guys want to pause the video and kind of read that to yourself and then kind of come back. What it mainly talks about is it's God talking to Moses. And God telling Moses that I have seen my people, they have cried out to me. I have seen them suffer. And he goes on and talks to Moses and says, we're going to bring them out. We're going to bring them out of Egypt and out of Pharaoh's hands. And you're going to be the man to do it, Moses. So let's go and do it. And the way Moses interacts with God is he says, who am I? Who am I to go in front of Pharaoh and bring your people? And then God is like, God reassures him and tells him, this will be I'm not 100% sure. I don't know off the top of my head, but he reassures Moses and says, bring out my people. And this is the mountain you shall worship me on. And so then I did actually research on the word that is used in Hebrew. I know that the NRSV says, one of the Bible translation, the NRSV says observed. The CEB says seen, and the Message says long look. The actual Hebrew word, because the Bible isn't originally in English, and the Hebrew word that the Old Testament was written in is actually ra'ah. And this word pretty much means to see with one's own eyes, for someone to physically see with their own eyes. And it's interesting because if you put that in perspective into what God said, because observed is a really light way of saying to see, right? And when you observe someone, you can say observe in many different ways. You could say, people who are watching this video, they're observing us, they're watching us, they're distant, but they're seeing us. But you could also say, researchers observing guinea pigs while they're doing testing or anything, or observing students when they're doing research and getting statistics. They're observing is a really light way to say, of watching. But when we see that the Hebrew word that is being used is actually just physically see. And so that pretty much that means when you put two and two together, it means that God was right there when he saw the Israelites suffering. God was there with it and watched with his own eyes and saw the Israelites suffering. And it's super crazy because I'm sure the Israelites, the slaves, did not know God was there at all. They didn't know that he was watching. All they knew was that they were crying and they needed God. And so it really changes up, our perspective, because, if God can see the Israelites suffering while they're being slaves, if he can see them physically with their own eyes, wouldn't he be able to do the same to us? And so many times we think that God is on another planet. We think God looks at us in the same way that we look at stars through a telescope. We think that we think that God is looking at our problems and looking at our everyday life, through a telescope. And it's so easy to think that God is far away and that he's not near. But, just going back to the definition, is if you're going to see someone with your own eyes, you have to be pretty close to be able to see someone, because you're not going to be able to see someone a mile away. You're not going to really know who they are. You're going to see a figure, but you're not going to really know who or what. So what I can take from this definition and plug it into the passage is that God is near. And another interaction that happens, because this whole lesson, the series is all about interactions, we see that Moses says no to God. And it's interesting because it's like God was like super hyped up, like, I don't know if you guys ever thought about it, but God actually picked his fit. He decided what he wanted to wear, because he could have came in all of his glory. Our eyes could have burned. Moses' eyes could have burned, when he came or whatever. He could have came in all of his glory, but he decided and actually picked out a nice fit, and he came as a burning bush. And I think it's kind of funny because the way we talk nowadays, it's like, dang, that fit is fire. I'm like, dude, literally God's fit was actually on fire. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I bet you if Moses would have seen him, like, he would even, like, beside all the cringiness, Moses would have been like, dude, that's on fire, dude. Like, that bush is on fire. So I just thought that was hilarious, but like, it's true, And so God comes, he picks, his fit. He decides to come as a burning bush, and he doesn't even ask Moses. He tells Moses, we're gonna save the Israelites. We're gonna bring them out, and you're gonna worship me. You're gonna worship me on this mountain. God called out to Moses, and Moses says, here I am. And I use the illustration of, when your mom calls, when your dad calls, when a family member calls you, you're like, hi, like, what do you need? Here I am. And that's the same thing that Moses says. But when you read, Moses went from, here am I to who am I? He kind of changed, the mood changed, and now he's just like, I don't want to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. I don't want to do that. The questions that I asked and the message that I gave is, this is when I started closing it up and was asking everyone, how close do you think God is? Because in Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 to 12, we read that God observed, and the Hebrew word that is being used is to physically see with their own eyes, whoever the word is being used to. And God was seeing the Israelites suffer with his own eyes. So how far do you think God is with that in mind? How close do you think he is? And I ask, are you thinking that God is so far away that he can't see your problems? Or are you like Moses, you pray and you ask for things from God, and you might not hear something for a couple of days or a couple of years, and then all of a sudden you hear, and then you get an interaction with God, and all of a sudden you're like Moses saying, who am I? One thing I just wanted to remind everyone about is that God is, God will, and God already has interacted with you. He will, and always has. Whether we see it or not, whether we don't see it like the Israelites, or if we do. And so pretty much I called the church, and even everyone, I call even people who are watching right now, to, when you interact with God, I call you to say, here I am, because we are here to serve, and God interacts with us, whether we know it or not. So I call you guys to be like Moses at first and say, here I am.
Thank you so much for that message. That was great. Is there anything more you want to say or add on to what you talked about? Because
yeah, I think one of the last things I'll say before you guys close it up, is that during this time it's really easy. I know some people are going through some difficulties. Things are going good and everything just went down, and people think that they lost interactions with God. They think God has left or God is not near. But even in the Bible, we see that God is near. God sees with his own eyes people suffering, and he can see people do great things with his own eyes. So God is near, and he's always watching. So that's the last thing I'll say.
Maybe that's more of a scare tactic as well.
Yeah. So be careful,
Yeah, don't kill anybody. Don't strike down any Egyptians.
Yeah, and if you have bad breath, how close do you have to be, to see someone? If you have bad breath, eat a mint ASAP,
Yeah,
I was gonna tell that to the church, but I was like, you know what, maybe not, because I know some people might have some stinky breath out here.
Yeah, definitely on a Sunday morning, just getting out of bed. All right, well, thank you again for joining us. It's a pleasure to hear your message. Maybe you can move on to the next part at some point soon.
Yeah.
I think we'd love to hear that too. But it's great hearing from you again.
You you made me think of a message I shared with the youth, I think the week before I graduated college. It must have been just a guess, like a substitute message or something that Ryan asked me. But yeah, it has to do with the closeness of God. So when you ask, how close is God? And I was like, oh. In short,
I looked at it before I made my sermon. I looked at that message you gave.
What? You did? No, you didn't. Shut up. Get out of here. I might share it with you. Essentially, the title is God is Too Close for Comfort.
So, yeah, again, you're welcome to join us in the Zoom call after our video. But if you're available tomorrow night, I think the students would love seeing you.
Okay.
But,
yeah,
I mean, technically, this is the end of our video, so thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed hearing from an old friend again. Yeah, join the Zoom call, because we miss you guys. We want to see your faces more. We don't see it often enough. So, all right. That's the end of the video.
See you guys later. Bye.
So it sounds like
Proof. What the heck?
I need to start because I need to lose weight, or I need to do the homework, all these things, and it's so easy to think about not starting. And